Hello, thank you for listening to A Glimpse of the Kingdom. I am David Pendergrass. I was excited because of something my son did. In fact, at the time of this recording, it was last night. At the time of this recording, we live in Florida, and the Florida State Fair is going on, and we were at the fairgrounds, and inside of one of the gigantic stadiums, football field linked places full of little vendors and stuff to sell, which was, to me, great fun and kind of relaxing and so forth. We passed by something that is, a lot of things were selling, but a couple things were not selling. They were just giving information. And one was by Scientologist, and you could see the Dianetics books. If you're unfamiliar with Scientology, you could look it up. And L. Ron Hubbard, who was, in fact, unless it's been broken, the last I heard, the documentary, was that he holds the Guinness Book of World Records of most amount of fiction stories written. Anyway, that's what he did for a long time. He was in the Navy for a little bit, kind of a failed effort there, and ended up starting his own religion called Scientology. But before he started the religion, he wrote a book called Dianetics, and it's kind of a watered-down pop psychology deal, and Scientology, and then eventually turned into a religion. That's what he claims, so they can get tax exemption. They fought against that for a long, long time, and finally the IRS granted them tax exemption and called it a religion. In fact, not that long ago, a couple of decades ago. And Scientology and the background behind it is some of the most absurd nonsense I've ever heard of someone who formed a religion. And for multiple reasons, and if you're a Scientologist or know someone, I mean, not to be upsetting to you, but it is full of things that are, for example, L. Ron Hubbard argues that the people have a kind of a soul creature inside of them, and they originally came from a different planet that became overpopulated. They sent these soul beings to Earth, and they'd send them to the top of volcanoes, and they blew up these population people in the spaceships by nuclear bombs above volcanoes, and most of them fled, most of them survived, or a big chunk of them survived, went to the oceans, and then they came inside of people. And that's why on the front cover of Dianetics there's a volcano. And Xenu was the main alien bad guy in the galaxy who did all this. I mean, it goes on and on and on. A lot of Scientologists don't know that. And a lot of them that find out don't care, because what they're going to say is, Scientology works for me. It works for me. I remember years ago, Tom Cruise was talking about that with Oprah, and it became a big deal. And then the second time around he talked about it, he basically just deferred it. He deflected it and said, just it works for me, read it for yourself, do your own research. And so instead of trying to articulate why Scientology is compelling, it's true, he did what every single modern American person does, and that's including most Christians. That is, the argument is it just worked for them. Anyway, so there's a lot of background. You can watch all kinds of documentaries on it. You can read Dianetics yourself and on and on. Well, anyway, my son was passing, but we were walking by as a family. My son saw that and got upset, and he said, I can't believe that. I can't believe how they're there, and, this is ridiculous, and it makes him mad, and he wants to talk to them and say, why do you believe this stuff? And of course, there's a little emotional background because my son Hayden had watched the TV series by, what's her name?
Leah Remini.
Yeah, Leah Remini.
Leah Remini.
Yeah.
She quit Scientology, and she was going through different stories of the people who, like, horror stories about what's happening.
Yeah, the horror stories of stuff. So he was upset about it, and he said, Dad, let's go. Don't you want to go talk to him? And I said, well, I do a little bit, but right now I want to enjoy time with my family. I don't always want to talk about it all the time because it was a good break. And anyway, but I certainly, yes, I did, and I appreciated that. And he said, but don't you want to save them? And I said, well, only Jesus saves them. But I understand the point. Yes, we can talk to him. But I said, Hayden, why don't you go talk to him? You're welcome to do that. And at the time, my wife was looking at some hair styling product, which eventually she purchased, because suckers. No, I hope she likes it. But anyway, that's what was going on. And so Hayden went over there, and so I prepped him. I said, well, here's what one way to start out is, of course, they're going to have you sit down and you could ask them. And Hayden and I talk about, Christianity and worldviews quite often, and he does a lot of his own reflection and stuff on it. And I encouraged him to go over there and discuss with him and start by the question, why do you believe this? So, as usual, ask more questions and we talk. And also, of course, don't forget that ideally when you bring up Christianity, bring up Jesus if you can. You don't want them to be upset that you brought it up because you were a jerk before then. You want to be as kind and open-minded as you can be. It's okay to be a little emotional, but the point is you don't want to be mean at all because, when you start about the gospel, they don't want to be associating you with the gospel and meanness. So anyway, he did. I went over to talk to him, and I thought it'd be great if Hayden kind of told a little bit of a story to talk about how he talked to the Scientologist. Now, my son, remember, is 15 years old, and he's 15 and a half, and I was not doing these kinds of things as a 15-year-old. So real proud of him, and I thought we'd just dialogue about that a little bit. So anyway, so you go up to him, and then what?
So I sat down at one of the ladies. I forget her name. I think it was Patricia or something like that. And I walked over and I said, "Hi, my name's Hayden." And she said, "You want to take a free stress test?" Because they had these giant signs about free stress test, which is not really what it's about. It's about doing the whole, I forget what it's called. What is it? You hold these little metal tubes with the wire sticking out, and it scans your stress levels, I guess. And that's one of the main things of Scientology. And so I asked her about it. I said, "So what do I do?" And so she asked me, "What's making you stressed out right now?" And I said, "My family getting dad getting a new job." And I said, "We might have to move," which is a completely honest statement, but I wasn't too sure because Mom was all freaked out that they were recording us or something silly like that. And so I asked her about Dianetics, how it came to be, L. Ron Hubbard, and she gave this awesome, epic story about how he went through World War II, was basically a hero on the naval front, and after getting horribly injured, he went back and saw that several soldiers were injured, and they gave him the same treatment. One soldier got better, one didn't, and it sparked something in him. So for 3 or 4 years, he went to different temples around the world and studied different, not psychologies, worldviews, religions, and he pieced together this thing. Apparently, later I talked to her about it, she said he pieced together this study about the reactive part of the mind, which is basically what they say in Scientology, is the part of the mind that stores all your negative thoughts and things. Mm-hmm. So for us, it would be kind of Christianity, like the devil, how he uses things and say, "You're not good enough for that." Basically, that part of the brain for them.
And by the way, that's part of what they call the thetans, Thetan. The thetan is the soulish being that's inside of you. They're aliens. Mm-hmm. That's the thetan.
The aliens.
The thetan has this reactive mind, but she didn't say that, but I'm just telling you that's the background, so go ahead.
So I asked her about that, and I thought, that's pretty interesting, and I was trying to be as nice as I could, and I said, "Well, that's amazing. This man single-handedly discovered a new part of the brain that no scientist or psychologist has ever known about ever in the history of humanity. So why isn't it more mainstream? I've seen on TV episodes, I was referencing Leigh Remini, but I didn't want to be direct in case that sparks some red flags, because I know on the show there's a lot of negative stuff about him. And so I said, I've seen on some TV show, some episode that was talking about how L. Ron Hubbard was a fiction writer a lot of the time for way before, like my dad said, he was the Guinness Book of World Records for most fiction books written. And she said, "Yeah, I think so. I think people use that because they rag on him for his other works like Dianetics just because he did that." And I wanted to say, well, it would seem there's no correlation at all that he's writing about aliens and all that stuff, and then Dianetics is talking about aliens running from evil aliens and a lizard god and all this stuff. And so where I was going with that was, I asked her about that, and I said, "So why do you guys fight with psychologists and stuff? Because I've seen it on TV." And she said, "Well, they believe that humans are just animals or just creatures, while we believe humans are deep spiritual beings that need to be treated and helped." I said, really? I was listening to what she was saying, and she kept repeating the exact same thing over and over about how awesome L. Ron Hubbard was. And then I said, "So that doesn't make sense to me, because if he discovered this new part of the brain that scientists had never seen before, you would think he would be some local legend like Albert Einstein, because that's insane. That's awesome." I'll say, "I'm full on for religion," or something like that. The main leader discovered something brand new and important like that. And she said, "Well, we don't believe in taking, the Scientologists don't believe in taking antidepressants or things that help physically through medication," because she said, "We believe that all this stuff basically works."
Well, no, hold on. You asked her if he had done all these amazing things, why haven't we heard more about him?
Oh, yes, that's, yeah.
If this was so groundbreaking. Yeah.
And she said because the psychologists and stuff, because the animals and antidepressants and all that, they just don't believe him, because he basically came in and messed up everything they taught and all that. And so I asked her about the...
It's because he was so against the status quo. He was so in the minority, they squelched his discoveries.
And so I asked her, I said, how did you get into this? Because my main goal was to ask her how she went into it and eventually hopefully get to a conversation where we can talk about evidence for things, because that's where a lot of fun, I guess, for me comes from, is having discussions with people. And she said, well, I went in, and she basically said, I had this really rough breakup, and I went in, my parents were Scientologists, and I went in and did all the stuff, and I just got better. I mean, I just started doing stuff full time, and it was great. And I said, so with the reactive part of the mind, how do you get over humps like that? Because going into a new religion or stuff, there's evidence for things. And the reactive mind, I haven't seen any charts or anything about it being there. And she started to get closer as the conversation went on. She got closer and closer to me. And she said, well, it's not part of the mind. And then I was confused, and I waited a few seconds. I said, so it's called the reactive part of the mind that isn't part of the mind? That doesn't make brain part of that brain? And she said, well, it's not about, you need to read the book. You need to read the book, and inside the book, it's your truth. You're going to figure it out and what's inside. So I thought, that seems a little touchy. So I said, so what about, do you guys believe in a God or something? How does that work? She said, well, you really go in, discover for yourself what you believe in. I said, so it's like like Hinduism, that you can just pick your own God that you believe in? She said, no, we believe in one overall force or power, but it's more like it doesn't reveal itself until you do this, like I can't remember what it's called, not the free stress test, but whatever, the little metal tubes, and you go through and learn about all that stuff. And so she kept avoiding the question about what I was asking her. And then I said, well, one thing I'm confused about, though, is L. Ron Hubbard, he discovered all these things, and then he's talked about them, written all these books about them. But you haven't given me, like, did he do studies? Like, how did he figure this out? Because I know he went through a temple, and he went through this really awful experience. How did he figure this stuff out? And she said, well, like I said, he was in a hospital, all that stuff. He went to some temples. Said, I know, for example, the autism study, the doctor who said that vaccines cause autism, he did that one test, and magically it was, oh, whoa, it works, it's true. And it all strikes. And then every other scientist, every single one afterwards that did it, was absolutely the opposite of what he said. And so that was disproven. I said, did anybody else do it with him? Because I know in the scientific community, that's one of the things you do, so people aren't caught lying. And she said, oh, yeah, people did it, did it. So she didn't answer. She was just saying that people did it. She didn't give me names or anybody. I don't know if she just didn't know who it was. That's probably the most likely thing, or she just didn't want to get to it.
Well, and back to her, why do you believe it? Do you have evidence? Remember, she said more there.
Yeah. She said that basically, no, I don't have it. It's gotten better for me. I got better after I did this stuff, and that's where
she had a breakup with a boyfriend, and she got better, and
yeah, when she said it worked for me, I thought, well, that's interesting, because other things that doesn't really work. And I said, so what about one person who goes in, say he has really awful depression, goes in, does it, and nothing changes. He still has really awful depression. Does that disprove all of Scientology? Because if it doesn't work for you, doesn't that make it all not true? And then she got really close and said, no, that's not what I'm saying. You listen to what I'm saying. You gotta read the book, do all this stuff, basically really look at the book. And she wouldn't give me an answer. I said, what about you, though? I want to talk about you, not Dianetics or any of that. How did you go into this new religion and go through and just get all this? Did you just go along with it? Did you ever ask questions about evidence or anything? And her basic answer was, no, I didn't, because it worked for me. And that's all that matters, is that I don't have to look too far into it. It makes me feel good, so I don't need any more. I don't need to look into anything or make sure anything works for real. And then I asked her about the God thing and the disproves out of all of them. But she got pretty angry once I brought up the how did he discover it part again. She got really close and said, look, you clearly look like you're really curious, but I have to go talk to other people. And people were walking by, and nobody was going talking to her, because everybody that walked by was a punk to them or just didn't talk.
Yeah.
There was nobody else talking to them. Yeah. It was already where we were. It was pretty empty. Yeah. She just wanted out.
So that's most of it, right? Because about after that you left. Yeah. So what are some reflections on the conversation?
I thought it was a good conversation. I wish she would. I was trying. My main goal was just to learn more about it. I've already heard so many negative things, and I was wondering, is that really all there is to it? Is just constant negative, or maybe there's some good, or there's some meaningful part in there? But I didn't get any of that from the conversation. What she told me was that she didn't know about the stuff, and that you just need to read the book. Read the book.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one thing I took away from it. Was that.
And I know we discussed some of this yesterday as well, but if you reflect on her response to your questions, imagine she's a Christian for a second. So now what would you think about that?
Well, I would think, I don't know if I can. Is this from a differing perspective? Like I'm not a Christian?
Like you say you're a non-Christian asking Christian. She said the same thing.
If that was the same mindset and I wasn't a Christian, I would think, well, how can this be true? She hasn't given me anything for anything. I mean, every answer I've said, if she just refers back to the Bible over and over, I'm going to be very. Why should I do that? You have the burden of proof. You have to tell me what you have to believe and all that stuff. And if you can't do that, there's no reason for me to go into it, because it's just, if they can't know what it is, why should it be trustworthy?
Yeah, and and Hayden and I talked about this yesterday a good bit, because so many Christians would sound just like her. I mean, they would sound just, go read the Bible, go read it for yourself and decide. I am not fully opposed to the thing she said, for the reason she had for believing it, because she can have those views. For example, a person can hold a view, I think it's true because it worked for me. It just means it's based on anecdotal evidence. It's not based on any kind of objective, rational evidence. You might say, why do you... The problem with that is people can be deluded.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like a rabbit was in the room, and it was true for me. Well, that doesn't mean there's a rabbit in the room. I can just say, you might need medicine, you might need therapy.
Yeah.
The same thing with Christianity. And people could say, well, it just works for me. And a lot of people say that. Well, a person can say it, but the second a person says, do you have any kind of evidence that other people might be able to explore, examine, test, think about? That's where the Christian needs to do a much, much better job than saying, it works for me. They need to do more than that. One is because there is other evidence for that. Two is because Christianity is not based on simply anecdotal evidence. And I'm being very specific here, because many times Christians, and I'm fine, the New Testament supports this. You think about John's Gospel, or even in Acts, the person says, all I know is I was blind, now I can see. That is my experience. You know, I don't know if you remember in John's Gospel, they get all upset. Jesus says they think he healed someone. And they bring in him, and they bring in his parents. The parents said, dude, he was blind from a long, long childhood. This really happened. Well, that is a subjective, we might say, testimony. There's nothing wrong with testimony saying it's the reason why I come to believe something. But Christianity is more than that. All the New Testament, and certainly as a worldview, it's more than that. And so I'm not faulting her for saying it, quote, worked for me. And that's in and of itself. But Christians must do better than that, because there has to be more than that. One is because there is, and two, because Christianity is based on more than that. The other thing is because it fits nicely. That kind of explanation, it works for me, fits nicely in something I've talked about in podcasts before, and other Christian philosophers and people have. And that is, for most people in the American West, religion is not a form of knowledge, it is a form of preference. So now it's been popular to say, as you've heard, we've talked about this, it's my truth, it's my personal truth, which just means it's my subjective experience. But they throw in the word truth to make it sound authoritative. Religion is a way to shut people down. That's right, you have to shut up now. You have no say on what I think, because it's mine. And since the number one sin in the West is bigot intolerance, you can't say against me, which is another way of saying judgment. You can't judge me, it's intolerant. And so what I do is I have to say it's my truth. It works for me. Or they'll say things like it's a personal choice. All choices are personal. That's stupid. That's nonsense. That makes no sense at all. What I mean, it's their way of saying you can't speak against what I think or feel because it's my personal truth. The Christian response to that is, yes, I can, because nonsense is nonsense. If it's your personal truth that babies should be molested, I will speak against you. Your behavior is horrible and it's evil, and your thought process is sick. What's my personal truth? Now, if you give that example to most people, they're going to say, well, that's different. Yeah, they shouldn't do that. Wait a second. No. A pedophile says it's their personal truth too. The point is, everybody knows there are certain objective ethical norms that we should or should not do. Everybody knows that. It's just that when it fits in this other area they think is acceptable in cultural standards, then it's okay to say it's my personal truth. Christians, it's okay. Now, how we do it matters a lot, but it's okay for us to say, yes, I can, depending on what topic you're talking about. If you're saying it's your personal truth you like chocolate ice cream over vanilla, wonderful. If you think it's your personal truth that Christianity is false, well, then we disagree. Because now you're talking about something beyond your own personal feelings. Mm-hmm. That's what religion does. It talks about more than personal feelings.
Like in the court of law, you can be like, I charge him with murder. Do you have any evidence? Well, it's my personal truth that he's guilty.
Right, I just feel like he's guilty. And that's why even people with Dianetics or Scientology, all of them, you cannot fall for that nonsense. So when a person says, it works for me, you might say, wonderful, but is it true? Believing in Santaism might work for you. You might be a good boy or girl, and you might be happy. But it's false nonsense. Mm-hmm. Dianetics is true or false. We really do have Thetan alien souls, and Xenu fire. Billions of years ago, there was a galactic war, which is what he argued
with Lizard King.
If that really happened, it's true. If it's false nonsense, then his whole substance, his whole background philosophy of why we do what we do, it's false nonsense. Now, we can have things that work that are false nonsense. That if we can believe false things that work, you might think the reason that lotion works you put on your knee that's sore has fire in it and it burns. No, it doesn't. It has a chemical that causes a burning sensation. You might think, no, it's because every time I've ever felt this sensation is because I've been burned by a fire. You say, it must be fire in the lotion. No, there's no fire in the lotion. But it still works. Mm-hmm. So your beliefs about it can be false. C.S. Lewis talks about the mere Christianity. Or is it God in the Dock? Anyway, it's called...
Come on, Dad. No, this
I know. I think it's... He's called...
Sinner?
The chapter's called Horrid Red Things. He talks about a girl about poison. Anyway, she might think poison is always one thing. So your beliefs about it can be false. And so do you see my point? So when a person says, well, it works for me, it might have worked for you. False things about reality might still work for you for other reasons. But and I would say that's fine. You can say this thing and believing false things is true. That it worked for you. But the second you make a propositional statement about reality outside of your feelings, it's up for grabs. Mm-hmm. That's the difference. The second you do that, the second you go, we believe there is a higher power, personal lizard king, whatever, we feel it. But if you say there is one, you go, now where's your evidence for that? Mm-hmm. And Christians ought to do more than, I feel like Jesus is present, versus, no, he really did exist. He lived in Galilee under Prefect Pontius Pilate, and on and on. So my point is, as soon as you say more than feelings, but that's going to be the go-to, and the more you and our listeners and myself, the more we can think clearly about that and wait for people to say it, because they're going to say it. It works for me. It's true for me. You might say, oh, okay. So my favorite response would be, oh, so then I shouldn't believe it. Mm-hmm. They're going, what do you mean you should? Truth. Yeah, they're going to say, what do you mean you shouldn't believe? You say, well, you don't think it's true. You're just saying it's your feelings. It's like a gut feeling. Okay, I mean, I trust it. Okay, but it's not true then. Oh, I know. Are you saying it's true? Well, you want to hear him say the words. Is it true or false? You see my point? Mm-hmm. Well, no, I mean, I think it's real. Is it true? Did it really happen or not? Well, I think so. Oh, well, then we're talking about something outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. Okay, now why is that convincing to you? What evidence do you have that it happened? Because it worked for me. No, we're back to you now. I'm not talking about your current psychological state or your feelings. I'm talking about the thing outside of your psychological state or feelings. And that's true both ways. When Christians fall back and go, well, it's just true for me, it feels good, we're all at a dead end. The second reflection is, and I say this often, and it's not absolutely true, but it's somewhat true, most people are about 2 questions into a dead end. And that's true for Christians. So when you say, why do you believe so-and-so? Well, it's because da-da-da. Why do you believe that? Go read in the book. Mm-hmm. You see, it's 2 or 3 questions in, you're at a dead end right away, because those things, they don't know what to say past that. And of course, Christians the same way. My encouragement is for most Christians to try to say something more than 2 questions into it. I don't know, just go read the Bible, or just have faith. It's very common in Mormons. They'll say, read it and you'll have a warm, fuzzy feeling, and that's your evidence. This last quick thing right now is, something I was so proud of is because I watched you from a distance, and I put a picture on my. If you look at a Glimpse of the Kingdom Facebook page, you'll see a picture of it in action. Hayden was talking to her. What I was proud of is Hayden didn't scream, yell, cuss. He only does it on the weekends, and so on the weekday it's different. I mean,
and
that was
at
good.
mom.
And at mom. So, but I really was good. It looked like if you walked by and saw from a distance, it would look like this young boy or young man, whatever, is talking to a girl and they're having a conversation. That was good. And also, I'm very proud of the fact that Hayden did that and asked more questions than taught. More than, well, I think. He asked more questions. The one thing so that's good. It's good. It's good. But ask questions and so forth. It's a really good thing. It's always a good thing. The one thing going forward that I hope and pray more as Hayden does this more often is that at some point before the conversation's over, he has a little small challenge or encouragement to read a gospel. A small encouragement. I hope you think carefully at some point about Jesus. And I encourage you not think about the church, not go read whatever, but if you'll just read a gospel, pick any of the 4 or all of them if you want. And I hope you'll think him seriously. And another thing that is possible, it's always possible, is if they want to have more conversations about this kind of stuff, and you're always love to talk about religion and philosophy or whatever, and you're open-minded if you've shown that, is to give them an email address. Now, in your case, it's different. You're younger, but you can give it to me. But that way you're some open. You never know. You never know. Or put my website, davidpendergrass.com or something. You never know. But that way.
And on Facebook and Twitter.
And Facebook, Twitter, at this, at that. But like I told Hayden, he was just immediately, Hayden's tendency is to say, well, I wish I'd have said this. And I was trying to have him stop discouraging him because he did a lot of things very well. And one of the things he did real well is I told him to use the Greg Kokel expression from Stand to Reason. He's in California. He said his goal is to put a pebble in their shoe. One thing I like about that, several things I like about that expression. You want to get someone a little irritated, but in a good way, like, oh man, I have to figure that out. And I think Hayden did that. Who knows how it's going to work out in the kingdom come? We don't know. He might see her in the world to come, and it all started with that conversation. Maybe not. But whatever it is, I guarantee you no other 15-year-old sat down and talked to her like this. Other people might have, but not a kid. And she's thinking, that kid had these questions about, I'm serious. It's gonna stick around. The other thing that's good, as I encouraged Hayden last night, is don't forget every conversation has a time limit. And when you don't know the person, usually the time limit's pretty short. I mean, I think you were there about 15, 20 minutes. I think it was.
Yeah, I wasn't there that long.
And that's okay. There's only so much you can cover. And I've said this many times in podcasts and sermons. You need to practice having your gospel presentation or something like an elevator speech. Can you get it down to 30 seconds? And then, or can you say more? Now, when you're asking questions, you have more time. You can have more time. But try your best to think about this ahead of time, which me and Hayden do. And Hayden's doing a much better job of thinking about how would I say that? And what would I say it? And how would I help them dialogue? And how would I ask questions? And so I'm glad that you put a pebble. And I'm glad that you did asking questions and you kept your composure. And I'm glad that you did it in such a way that hopefully it bothers her in a good way, that she'll go back and think about such things. But good. And I was real proud of the fact that you had, to say it colloquially, you had a heart, you had a passion. It bothered you that they believe it, but you wanted to do something about it. Hayden wasn't like the people who walked by and might have just said hateful words or cussed him out, or I'm not doing that dumb, blah, 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 blah. And one guy even walked by and cussed a guy or girl, a woman, while he was sitting there. So my son didn't do that. Instead, he's like, I want to go talk to him. And that's the way to do it. So I'm real proud of you for that.
Well, thank you.
When I was 15, I wasn't doing that.
Are you smoking in the woods?
Probably loaded drunk.
Probably, yeah. With
multiple girls chasing me.
Yeah.
It was a common problem. The girls,
I'm
not
probably
the
over you on those numbers. Mm-hmm. Will this give me an extra crown in heaven?
This will. There's no crowns or heaven. But anyway, all right, enough that.
That's true.
Just kidding. I've never drunk before. Anyway.
That's mostly true.
Good stuff. Anything else?
I love Jesus and cocaine. Not really. Don't do drugs. Stay in school.
Oh, no. Stay in school. Well, the conversation isn't finished. You can always reach out to me on social media. Are you on Facebook? I am too. At Glimpse of the Kingdom. Glimpse of the Kingdom on Facebook. Be sure to like it and you can see updates there. Also, if you're on Twitter, check me out at Dr. D. Pendergrass, at Dr. D. Pendergrass, or at Glimpse the King, at Glimpse the King. And I try my best to respond to comments and questions on there as quickly as I can. If you want more, there are many more resources on the podcast and my blog. Go to my website, davidpendergrass.com, and you can see a full list of the podcast, and my blog is available for free. Are you active in a church right now? I'd be happy to come out to your church and do all kinds of classes and workshops there. Check out davidpendergrass.com, davidpendergrass.com for more information. And may God in His great grace give you even just a glimpse of His kingdom this week. See you next time.